Alright guys, so I'm officially back from my family vacation and I missed a lot. So over the next couple of days, we're probably going to have several videos out covering everything that I missed. But the big news here that I wanted to talk about in this one is it was confirmed that the leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, was killed by the IDF in basically what looks to be just like a random occurrence. Right, not some sort of an intelligence-based, targeted assassination, but just a random encounter between Sinwar and an IDF battalion. So we're going to go over some of the details here on what we know so far on his death. I'm going to show you the video of his sort of like final last stand that Israel released for some reason, and then a couple other points that I think are important to note in all of this. So here to start us off, the timeline of the killing of Hamas leader Yahya al-Sinwar. On Wednesday at 10 a.m., an Israeli soldier from the 450th Battalion in Rafah, southern Gaza, observed the movements of people entering and exiting a building in Tel al-Sultan and reported the situation to a battalion commander. Following this, the Israeli army began advancing towards the building where armed individuals were detected. Around 3 p.m., tanks and infantry units were called to the area, and the movements of 3 individuals entering and exiting the building were monitored by a drone. And we're going to see that drone footage here in a minute. They say the Israeli military believed that the individuals they were monitoring were part of an advanced unit of Hamas resistance fighters providing security around the building and defending against the occupation of Gaza. An Israeli drone then bombed them. After the drone strike, a clash ensued between Israeli soldiers and 3 resistance fighters who were all injured during the exchange, including, it looks like, Sinwar. The group accompanying Sinwar then split up, with Sinwar and his comrades moving to a different building. As Sinwar moved to the 2nd floor of the building that he entered, the building was then hit by Israeli artillery bombardment. After the strike, an Israeli drone entered the building where Sinwar was to conduct a scan and to monitor, and the drone identified that masked fighters, including an injured Sinwar, were inside the building. The wounded Sinwar attempted to bring down the drone by throwing a stick at it, and shortly after, the building where Sinwar was located was bombed again by Israeli tanks. On Thursday morning, Israeli soldiers returned to the building for a search and control operation where they then realized that one of the deceased fighters might be Sinwar. So again, this wasn't like the Israeli military had some advanced intelligence on the exact locations and movements of Sinwar and they went and they targeted him. This seems to be just a random encounter that happened between an IDF battalion and Sinwar, who was apparently out in the field with an AK-47, with a vest, fighting alongside other Hamas militants, which in and of itself is kind of wild, given that the main narrative that we have been hearing from Israel on Sinwar is that he was holed up in some sort of an underground tunnel surrounded by Israeli hostages, using them as human shields. But it turns out this is what he was doing. So this is the video, guys. Definitely going to get me demonetized on YouTube for showing you guys this, I think. But this is the drone footage of essentially Sinwar's last stand. This was after he had already been injured. According to the video, it looks like his right arm, was basically completely blown off. He's basically on the brink of death. And then you're going to see here that he picks up what looks to be sort of like a stick or maybe some piece of debris from the building that's been destroyed. He's right here, and then he throws it at the drone. So, I mean, he's clearly awake here. It looks like he's maybe barely conscious. And as the video goes on here, I think they identify that this is a Hamas militant. Now, I mean, again, keep in mind, at the time when this encounter was happening, the IDF didn't know that this was Sinwar. They thought this was just some random Hamas militant, right? So then he picks up, I mean, again, it looks like maybe a metal piece of debris that had fallen from the ceiling or something. He picks this up. His arm is blown off right there. And sort of in his last stand, he picks up the piece of metal and chucks it at the drone. And then later again, he was, I think, finally taken out by further Israeli strikes. So the first question that I had when I saw this footage, I mean, first off, regardless of whether or not you like Sinwar, you think he's a complete monster, this is insane footage, guys. And my first question was, why would Israel release this footage, right? Because I guess from an Israeli perspective, you could look at him, sort of slumped over in a chair here and throwing a stick and whatever, and you could say, oh, he looks pathetic or something. But I think your average Palestinian resistance fighter this is like textbook martyrdom here, right? From their perspective. This is somebody who, according to Israeli reports before, was, hiding like a coward in some sort of a tunnel underground, surrounded by hostages. And then here he is sitting in a chair out in the field with reportedly an AK-47 by his side, and like throwing a stick or a piece of metal at an Israeli drone after having his arm blown off. I'm like, my point is, from an Israeli PR or an Israeli propaganda perspective, why would you release this footage, right? Is this not going to be a massive inspiration to Palestinian resistance fighters? Is this not going to be a huge PR loss for you in the long run? I mean, it's so confusing to me as to why Israel would publicly release this footage here. But they did, and so we get this, this wild footage here of Yahya Sinwar, leader of Hamas in Gaza, and his sort of like final stand there, I guess. Now, a couple of different points that I wanted to bring up in the aftermath of all of this. So here we have Mohammed Shahada from Euromed Human Rights Monitor. He says, if it gets confirmed that Israel killed Sinwar, it was confirmed, by chance, without intel, it means he most likely deliberately decided to engage and die in combat on the front lines in Rafah, not in a tunnel and without guards. Hamas will easily build a heroic tale like Sheikh Is el-Din Qassam fighting to the end to boost their popularity and recruits. Exactly what I was just saying. Sinwar's brother, Mohammed, a top Qassam militant, would be the one most likely to run Gaza during the rest of this war. There are likely a couple other top militants who can also fill the void. His likely killing would, on the other hand, debunk Israel's myth that if they reach Sinwar, they'll find the hostages surrounding him, a talking point to keep the war going, which makes a ceasefire now more inescapable. Now, that last point I think is indisputably true. One of the main justifications that Israel has been using to level Gaza to the ground has been, well, guys like Sinwar are in these, deep tunnels underground, and so we have no choice but to drop 2,000-pound bombs on residential buildings in order to go after them. And then it turns out that he's actually above ground, in broad daylight, getting into confrontations with the IDF. So it does kind of, poke some holes in this narrative that we've been hearing from Israel, specifically on that front. But I mean, it's also, again, true, and just in terms of propaganda, in terms of the PR war, I don't see how this works out in favor of Israel. I mean, it's, again, just bizarre to me that they would release this footage here. But we continue. We have another point here from Omar Badr. He says, quote, obviously imitating the Israeli government here, we had to bomb and starve and burn and kill tens of thousands of Palestinian children because Sinwar is hiding in a tunnel surrounded by children and hostages. But also we killed Sinwar in a regular firefight. And it looks like that's exactly what ended up happening. This is reportedly his body after this entirety occurred. Now, we also have here from Greg, a Middle East correspondent for The Economist, saying, and I think this is an important point here, a lot of people seem hopeful that Netanyahu will use Sinwar's killing as an opportunity to declare victory, negotiate a hostage deal, and end the war. But to believe that, you basically have to ignore everything that Netanyahu has said and done over the past year. And this is an incredibly important point. We're going to get to Kamala Harris's, commentary after all of this occurred here. But in order to believe that this is going to be Benjamin Netanyahu's off-ramp, right? In order to believe that this is going to be his declaration of victory, okay, we're finally done in Gaza, we can go back to Israel, we don't have to continue to escalate in Lebanon and with Iran. In order to believe that, you would have to completely misunderstand what Israel's goals in Gaza have been, right? The goal in Gaza was not just to take out the leadership structure of Hamas. The goal in Gaza was not even just to eliminate Hamas as an organization, right? The goal in Gaza from the beginning, to anybody who has been paying attention, has been to make life in Gaza impossible, and then to indefinitely occupy or potentially even resettle Gaza. That has been the actual primary goal. It has been a collective punishment campaign of the entirety of the Palestinian population since October 7th. That's been the goal. So in order to think, well, this is the end, this is the off-ramp, Bibi is surely going to do a victory lap now and end all of this. No, of course not, because his goal was never just to take out Sinwar and then pack it up and go home. No, that's never been the goal from day one. So here we have Kamala Harris joining in to give us her commentary on this. Let's go ahead and listen to what she had to say here.
Today, Israel confirmed that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is dead, and justice has been served. And the United States, Israel, and the entire world are better off as a result. Sinwar was responsible for the killing of thousands of innocent people, including the victims of October 7 and hostages killed in Gaza. He had American blood on his hands. Today, I can only hope that the families of the victims of Hamas feel a sense and measure of relief. Sinwar was the mastermind of October 7, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. A terrorist attack that killed 1,200 innocent people and included horrific sexual violence and more than 250 hostages taken into Gaza, including 7 Americans, living and deceased, who remain in captivity. A terrorist attack that triggered a devastating war in Gaza, a war that has led to unconscionable suffering of many innocent Palestinians and greater instability throughout the Middle East. In the past year, American special operations and intelligence personnel have worked closely with their Israeli counterparts to locate and track Sinwar and other Hamas leaders, and I commend their work. And I will say, to any terrorist who kills Americans, threatens the American people, or threatens our troops or our interests, know this: we will always bring you to justice. Israel has a right to defend itself, and the threat Hamas poses to Israel must be eliminated. Today, there is clear progress toward that goal. Hamas is decimated, and its leadership is eliminated. This moment gives us an opportunity to finally end the war in Gaza. And it must end such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
Okay, so there's a ton we could say about that entire statement. I mean, starting off with the continued lies about October 7th, for some reason, that 1,200 innocent people were killed, that innocent civilians were killed. That's just objectively not true. There were hundreds of IDF soldiers who were killed as a part of that Hamas operation. There were also, we don't know the exact number, but potentially dozens, potentially hundreds of people who were killed by the IDF as a part of their Hannibal directive in their response to the Hamas attack on October 7th, where the IDF killed Israeli citizens as opposed to, potentially allowing them to be taken hostage. So the sexual abuse claims on October 7th, completely unproven, with no evidence provided, while also ignoring the actual evidence provided, sexual abuse of Palestinians in Israeli detention. I mean, so many different things we could say just about her narrative that she continues to repeat about October 7th. There certainly were war crimes, but there's no reason to lie about any of this. I mean, they just continue to lie about it over and over and over again. So there's that aspect of it. There's also this aspect of it of her trying to say that this is somehow going to bring us closer to a ceasefire, to an end of the war. And specifically, she says, to a reality in which Israel is secure and the Palestinians have a right to freedom and self-determination, right? Now, again, 2 things on that. Number 1, this isn't bringing us closer to a ceasefire, because Israel's goal in Gaza was not to take out Sinwar. It wasn't to take out Hania. Those were smaller goals as a part of a larger goal. But the larger goal was to decimate Gaza. Again, the larger goal was to make life in Gaza impossible, and to then occupy it, and to then potentially resettle it over time. And this is not some conspiracy theory. I'll show you the videos here of Israeli officials saying that's exactly what the goal is. But so you have that aspect of it. This is not necessarily bringing us closer to a ceasefire. If anything, I think you could make a solid case that this may bring us farther away from a ceasefire, because now Israel has killed the 2 main guys who could even hypothetically negotiate for a ceasefire. Again, Ismail Haniyeh, who they assassinated on Iranian soil in an escalation with Iran, and also now Sinwar. So you've eliminated the 2 main guys in the leadership structure of Hamas who would potentially be a negotiating partner, right, for a ceasefire. So I don't know exactly how you believe this is going to bring us closer to a ceasefire, unless you still delusionally believe that taking out Sinwar and taking out Haniyeh means that Hamas, or Palestinian resistance broadly, is just going to magically throw down their weapons and give up and surrender. That's not going to happen. So again, it's ridiculous to me that you claim this is going to bring about, get us closer to a ceasefire, it's also ridiculous to say that this is going to get us closer to Israeli security or to Palestinian freedom and self-determination. Guys, at the end of the day, this is really simple, okay? In order to stop militant Palestinian resistance, you have to address the underlying reasons why that resistance exists in the first place, namely the decades-long occupation and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. If you don't address those two things, then it doesn't matter if Hania is dead. It doesn't matter if Sinwar is dead. It doesn't matter if Hamas as an entire organization disappears from the face of the earth. There will still be resistance. There will still be blowback. That is an inevitability as long as you keep millions of people for decades under occupation and oppression. That is an inevitability. And the unfortunate reality of the Biden-Kamala Harris administration, as well as Trump, at the same time, let's not let him off the hook, is that they have absolutely no interest whatsoever in restraining Israel, in potentially cutting off weapons to Israel, and using the leverage that the U.S. has over Israel in order to force them into a ceasefire, or in order to force them into accepting a realistic long-term peace plan. They are unwilling to use that leverage. And because they are unwilling to use that leverage to force Israel into place, then Israel is going to continue with the genocide. They're going to continue with the invasion of Lebanon. They're going to continue to escalate with Iran. They're going to continue with the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in the West Bank. That is what's going to happen. This is not going to magically end any of this. Again, if anything, it might make it more chaotic and it might make it more difficult to bring this to a close. Now, to emphasize that point, here we had Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm not going to play this clip because it's in Hebrew, but his response to the killing of Sinwar was, quote, "The war has not ended. The war has not ended. Now it is clear to all of us here in Israel and abroad why we stubbornly said that we will not stop the war and we will go into Rafah. We will continue chasing our enemy until we have eliminated them all." So again, Benjamin Netanyahu, and let's be clear, also the U.S. perspective on how we could reach an end to all of this is that either every single aspect of Palestinian resistance drops their arms and surrenders, which is not going to happen, or every single member of Palestinian resistance is eliminated, killed, taken out of action. Neither of those things is going to happen. Point blank, period. That's not on the table. That's not hypothetically in the conversation of reality, right? So for him to use this, essentially what he's doing is he's using this as a justification to say, we took out Sinwar, and because we took out Sinwar, look, wasn't it justified for us to go into Rafah that Biden previously said was one of his red lines, and to completely obliterate it, to destroy a majority of the buildings in Rafah and in Gaza broadly as well, right? We were justified in everything that we have done up until this point, in bombing schools, mosques, churches, hospitals, refugee camps, UN shelters, aid workers, water infrastructure, farmland, everything under the sun. We were justified in obliterating Gaza because, look, we just got this nice PR win. We just got this symbolic victory in killing Sinwar. This is what Netanyahu is saying. This is how he views this. He doesn't view this as, look, we took out the big baddie, let's wrap it up and declare victory and this can be the end of it. No, he's saying this is a reason, right? Us killing Sinwar is a justification for us to continue with the genocide until Hamas is completely eradicated, which again is something that is not attainable. Now, we also have this here to further emphasize the same point. Here we have Benny Gantz, former Israeli prime minister, as well as former minister of defense, I believe. He said, "I would like to congratulate," and this is, by the way, supposedly the Israeli opposition, okay? Just to show you how in line the Israeli government broadly across the entire spectrum is when it comes to Palestinians. They say, "I would like to congratulate the IDF fighters who led the killing of Sinwar today. This is an important achievement with a clear message. We will pursue our enemies to the end, anytime and anywhere. The circle is closed, but the mission is not over. The IDF will continue to operate in the Gaza Strip for years to come." For years to come. This is the supposed Israeli opposition here, saying we are going to stay in Gaza for years to come. Not, as Kamala was just indicating, this is an off-ramp to get a ceasefire. They're saying the exact precise opposite of that. This is a justification for us continuing with the genocide. That's what they're saying. Now, to further emphasize this point, we also have member of the Netanyahu government here. This is Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Minister of National Security in Israel, says, what is the solution for Gaza? This is a quote. He says, occupation, settlement, and encouragement of immigration. Occupation, settlement, and encouragement of immigration. What he means there, this can be very easily translated as ethnic cleansing. That's what he means here. Occupation, settlement, ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. So, listen, guys, there's a huge discrepancy here between the Biden administration response, the Kamala response, versus what the Israeli government is saying. The Israeli government does not view this as an off-ramp. They don't view this as an opportunity to declare victory and to move on to achieve some sort of a ceasefire. They do not believe that. They are viewing this as an opportunity to justify what they have been doing so that they can continue doing it, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, but also in Lebanon, and also potentially continuing to escalate towards a regional war with Iran. This is what Israel's plan is, right? This is not up in the air. It's not hypothetical. The plan for Gaza, as it has been from the beginning, when they said we're going to cut off the food, the water, the electricity, etc., the plan for Gaza has been a collective punishment campaign of the entire population there. It has never been a war against Hamas. You don't destroy a majority of the standing structures in any given place in a targeted war against a militant force made up of 30 to 40,000 members. That's not how that works. This has been a war against the entire Palestinian population. That's what this has been from the start. And thankfully, we have guys who are psychotic enough, like Itamar Ben-Gvir, to make that point explicitly clear. Just outright saying the plan is occupation, settlement, and ethnic cleansing. That's the plan, right? So, again, the point remains that if Kamala, if Biden, if a potential Trump administration, which this is, has a negative % chance of happening, but if they want to actually bring an end to all of this, you have to use the leverage that the U.S. has over Israel. Point blank, period. You have to cut off the weapons to Israel. And by the way, that's not just some radical lefty position. Number one, it's supported by the vast majority of the American people. They don't want us to continue to arm and to fund Israel's genocide in Gaza, but it's also U.S. law, right? You are actively choosing to violate U.S. and international law in continuing to arm and to fund Israel. So follow the fucking law, listen to the American people, and actually end this. Don't say, hypothetically, you want this to lead to an end. End it. You have the power to end it. You've had the power to end it from day fucking one. The idea that the U.S. government, Kamala Harris, Biden, Matthew Miller, Antony Blinken keep coming out and saying, oh, well, we hope that this is a chance for a ceasefire. You guys have the power, more than anybody else on the face of the planet, to force a ceasefire. That is the power that you have right now. You're choosing not to wield it. You're actively choosing not to wield it. So there you have it, guys. Wild development here. Sinwar officially confirmed dead. Now you have Sinwar, Hania, Nasrallah, several other, top Hamas officials, several other top Hezbollah officials that have been killed, and yet there is no end in sight.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying